the way I see conference ministry is, we are there to support churches and clergy. That is the only real job of conference ministry. So we're supporting our clergy, like in this manner, and then through that, we're supporting our churches as well. So welcome, everybody. I have a few icebreaker questions here. One may be, how will you practice? Let's see, at the Lent in progress, attendees are now viewing. You shared this, Lee, right? No, you're on mute.
So you should be up in the polling right now. Everybody should have that popping up for them. The two questions: how will you practice Lent? And how will your congregation gather? And if you want, over in the chat, you can also give a little more detail. If you're giving up something or taking it on, you can share what that is. And as you share kind of how your congregation will gather, you can mention what congregation you're from, so we have a chance to get to know each other without having to take too long to do it.
Okay, Lee, now, while this poll is up, what do we do? I mean, how do I participate in the poll?
Is it not popping up for you?
It is popped up. It has popped up, but what do I do? Do I say, for instance, I want to take on something? What do I do there?
Just click on that.
Mine hasn't popped up.
Yeah, it should click. You should be able to click on one of those options.
Rudy, if you're a co-host, I think you can't take the poll. That's what I found before.
Ah.
Oh, okay, because
that makes sense.
this is, I thought the UCC is all about inclusion.
Yeah, but the UCC doesn't run Zoom.
Yes, but we're about sharing power, Rudy, not hoarding. So I will take away co-host privileges from those of you who've had it, so that you can vote on the polls. There you go. And I'll give those permissions back to you all who are helping share things along the way, so you'll have sharing permission along the way.
Okie doke.
Okay.
I was wondering why I was seeing stats instead of a button.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes more sense.
I will not ask for a recount.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I guess we've all taken the poll. Lee, do you want to share the stats of the poll and then maybe introduce yourself, and then kind of like popcorn from one little screen to the next, nominate the next person to introduce him or herself and share at least your setting, because we're not familiar, all of us, with one another. So at least share your setting and maybe one or two things about the poll or your ideas about Lent.
Sure. Just on the results, we only had one person giving something up, others 50% taking on something, and 40% just trying to keep things normal, which I think will be a nice Lenten practice. As far as gathering, it looks like 80% of us are going to be virtual or online, no one in person. And we've got a couple who are going to do something hybrid. It'll be fun to hear about those as we go along here to see what creativity there is. As for my own introduction, I'm at Covina Community Church, the Rainbow Church. We're in the 5710 gathering spot. And then I work for the conference part-time doing web communication and resource providing to congregations is one of the things in there. So things like this. And then I am the editor for Inside Out Camp Curriculum. The UCC's participating in that project with 6 other denominations, and I manage all the representatives and writers and all of that throughout the year. So I am part-time in 3 places. I will pass it over to Roger.
Thank you, Lee. So I'm Roger Barkley, and I'm the pastor at the Congregational Church of Northridge, where I've been now for almost 27 years. Our primary practice has been for Lent, Ash Wednesday. And I can't say we do a lot of Lenten things between that and Good Friday. We always made a big deal out of Good Friday. We have a kind of a big multi-sensory service that people participate in, and we invite other churches to also. So we're looking for ideas how we can do Ash Wednesday in particular in a virtual way. I have to say that our experience this past year doing everything virtually is we've actually grown stronger and closer, and we have more participation as a church than we had before. And so we want to be able to continue that. I'm sure later in the year we'll be making a transition into some kind of hybrid. We'll see how this all unfolds. Hard to tell. Robin Marie.
Oh, good morning. I'm Robin Marie McClement, and I am semi-retired. I was working with the UCC for almost 30 years. The last church I served was Irvine United Congregational as the director of education. I have a private practice as a spiritual director, and I'm going into my 9th year. And it has been a very, very busy year. Many people, really struggling with their faith and their relationship with God, frankly. So I have been quite busy, and it's stressful for a lot of our clergy as well. I have many of my clients are clergy. And so I think Lent gives us a time for, if you will, somewhat of a respite in this walk, this path with Jesus. And I'm hoping more people can take time to just offer themselves some rest for our spirits, because I think that's what's so much needed. And I'm hopeful that in this time, I was telling the gentleman when we first started, Rudy and Lee, that what I do appreciate about this pandemic is that it's called all of us to bring church home, and I mean really home, because church really is much more about the community and the Spirit of God working through us, and it's really supposed to be the finger pointing to the moon. And I think the pandemic has allowed us to encourage our members to really deepen their relationships with God. So that Lent offers us that space, and I'm looking forward to this conversation and how we can help our members to do that. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. And I nominate John Douglas.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Forrest Douglas, and I'm the pastor at Church of the Foothills in Ventura. And, we were in the midst of Lent when all of this started. So it's kind of bringing us full circle, right, to start thinking about Lent again. Last year for Lent, our congregation was using some resources that were created by a Sanctified Art. And the resources that we were using were around the idea of wilderness. And really this whole year has been a kind of wilderness for us. And, I think about how the time of wilderness is, it's a time of hardship, but it's also a time when community is formed, and it's a time when we learn how to more deeply rely on one another and more deeply rely on God. And it's a time when we learn a little bit more about who we are and who God is. And so I'm hoping that this coming Lent is a kind of continuation of that. So, Mitchell.
Thank you, John Forrest. My name is Mitchell Young. I serve as a pastor of the Montebello Plymouth Congregational Church. Montebello is, as I described, just south of Monterey Park if you're Asian, or just east of East LA if you're Hispanic. And it's a historically Japanese American church, 108 years old. And a lot of our members actually some of our members like to give up stuff for Lent. or the idea of taking on something. But I personally, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So I'm not necessarily leading by example on that, but I think a lot of them, they remember in the old days, they would be asked, what are you going to give up for Lent? And but the past 13 years, I've actually distributed ashes from our church parking lot. Montebello is 85% Hispanic. So, of course, when I put on the black shirt, pop in the collar, I get called father for the day. So, and when they ask, are you Catholic? I say, yes, but not Roman Catholic. And most of them don't care, as long as I get my ashes and don't have to wait in line. Yeah. I get 3 minutes later on to talk about it. So I nominate one of the Marys. Either one of the Mary.
I'll take one since BJ is really the other Mary. Let's see if I can get my video back on. I'm Mary Cyphers, and after 2.5 years as the interim at Corona Del Mar Community Church, I'm happy to say that I am back to my coaching and consulting full-time at Mary Cyphers Ministries. So I work with about a dozen pastors who are coaching clients and their congregations. And then I'm also working with Countryside Community Church in Omaha as they go through their search committee process. Right now, most of the churches I'm working with are online only. One of them is hybrid. I guess 2 of them are hybrid. So that's kind of where we're at. And for Lent, most of my colleagues are just barely, glimpsing Lent. You know, I remember seeing one of my colleagues post on Facebook, I think the week before Christmas, someone just posted Lent ideas. I'm so not there yet. And so I think, kind of people just got through Advent and Christmas. But I don't remember if it was Mitchell or Roger who mentioned, we started this in Lent last year. And I remember being naive enough and not understanding the virus enough to hope that we might be back by Easter. And it's so interesting, by June, I was trying to alert my congregation that they probably wouldn't be back together in 2021. And they all thought I was some kind of paranoid idiot. And now it's like, yeah, 2021 is going to be just a really tough year. And yet, again, I don't remember which one of you said, I think it might have been Roger, people closer together, churches that have figured out how to engage each other. There's just been some amazing relationship building. We've had to be more intentional. And I don't know about your experience, but my experience has been a lot of times our lay people are 1 hour a week Christians, right? And they can't be in this pandemic. They've had to engage more fully if they wanted to grow or even just stay connected. And it's been neat to watch so many people doing that. And I look forward to Lent being a time where we can give them some intentional. Lent's better to me than Advent because it doesn't have all the layers of Christmas and the festivities, and it's longer. Yeah. So I liked Robin Marie's idea that, this could be a real journeying time, a real enriching time spiritually if we can help our people get there. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And I'll toss it to the other Mary Cyphers, who's actually my spouse, BJ Bew. You need to unmute yourself, hon.
Hey, here we go. Yeah, it's actually not me barking, although sometimes it feels that way. I'm Mary Cyphers, spouse of BJ Bew. I am a writer. I am a pastor, currently between calls, author and a coach and a spiritual director. So I kind of wear a lot of different hats. I'm kind of disoriented in Lent for a different reason. Mary and I have been writing worship at home resources when we realized that people were going to be worshiping at home. We thought there really is nothing out there for people and churches that their congregations are worshiping at home. So when we quickly wrote an Advent Christmas resource, and then during Christmas we wrote a Lenten resource, and now we're writing an Easter resource. So I wake up and it's like, what season am I in? but it's been an interesting journey. I'm also the facilitator of a communities of practice, and I have to say that the churches in the community of practice, like Mary, are a little bit all over the map. Some are struggling to hold it together. Some have found that the needed additional attention and intentionality of staying connected has brought the church closer together. Some have been able to experiment and do things in worship that they could not have done if they were meeting in person, and they're grieving the idea that they may lose that after the pandemic, but they're also eager to get back to things that they did before the pandemic. So it's Lenten season is a really interesting opportunity to kind of sink into spirit and find out where we are and where we're going. One of the things that turned out when we wrote the book is that the Lenten, if you follow the lectionary, the Lenten scriptures really give you an opportunity to kind of cruise through salvation history. You go from the flood, and then you get the giving of the law, and then the writing the law on the heart. And when we looked at that, it was really interesting. It was like God is trying to figure this out too. It's like, okay, I'm going to try this. It's like, well, that didn't work. Let's do this. Well, that still didn't work. Let's go, and God continues to go further all in, and until you get to Jesus and the incarnation. So it was a really fascinating study and journey through salvation history, which I quite frankly haven't done since seminary. Occasionally as a lectionary preacher, you'll do that during Lent, but it was a fascinating intentionality for this year. And let's see, Lynn, I'll pass it off to you.
Lynn, you need to unmute yourself. Lynn, we cannot hear you.
Okay, sorry, Lynn Bradley. I'm worship director, I guess. I don't know that I have an official title, but United Church of the Valley. And we're in Murrieta. We are at this point a pastorless church. We have a team of people that have been really providing amazing messages, and it's certainly been a group effort that so far is working. I'm with everybody else in thinking that we're having a hard time wrapping our head around Lent yet. Let's just put it that way. I did want to say one thing. Lee, we just really appreciated the article that you wrote, and especially the questions you posed at the end of it. And I'm trying to imagine how that can be incorporated in our Lenten journey. Oh, I need to bounce it over to Heather.
It is so good to see all of you. You guys are just long-term friends, most of you, and just a few of you I have only known a little while, but it's just great to be among you. I'm Heather. I work at a small urban church in Long Beach, and we are the church that is doing hybrid because a lot of the people in the neighborhoods that I'm working in are struggling with internet connection, including my own. So we need the hybrid to just connect in ways that they cannot online. So we do it once a month, and we're trying to do it twice a month, except my musician got sick. So I have to wait till later this month for him to return. Young man, he'll be fine, but he's isolating right now. And as for Lent, my people, they're just, they don't have a good history of Lent. They don't usually have a practice of Ash Wednesday. I have some people who are absolutely, no, we don't want Ash Wednesday. We don't like the connotations of that. Jesus died for us. That's all we need. We don't need to go back into that part. So I'm looking, I always love BJ and Mary's stuff, and You know, the idea of sinking into the spirit is just a beautiful analogy that I'm starting, that might be something to play with as I think about Lent. Good to be here, everybody. Thanks. And I'll pass it over to Petra. Go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Petra Melise Sternberg, and I'm the pastor at First Congregational UCC in San Bernardino. I've been here 16 years now, which just seems impossible. Yeah, I think we're thinking a lot about the fact that this started. Our last two big events were we had a big Mardi Gras fundraiser for our youth, and then Ash Wednesday was awesome and wonderful last year, and those were our last big in-person celebrations, along with an Oscar party. But so there's that to sort of cycle around to. There's a lot of thinking about Lent is important for our congregation in lots of different ways, very diverse religious background, but lots of folks for whom it's really, really important season. And just, I guess I've been thinking a lot about just the massive amounts of grief and loss, depression, sadness, the community that needs to be built around helping people move through some of that right now. And the sort of, I think we've sort of been pulling back from doing too much grieving because we know so much more is still ahead. So I think that there's so much of that going on for us right now, and the explosion of cases in our community, at least, I assume in most of yours as well, has really sobered a lot right now. So we kind of got through Christmas, and now the bleak year is ahead. So that's where we're at. Kirsten, would you like to go next?
Wow, I really resonate with that, Petra. Thank you. Yeah, we got through Christmas and now it's January and the rest of the year. I think as I've thought about Lent recently, I'm Kirsten Linford, and I'm the pastor of Westwood Hills UCC in West Los Angeles. I've been here for almost 20 years, which is crazy. As I have thought about Lent kind of in the distance, I've thought, oh, we'll be fine. We did that online last year. And now as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, but we didn't have to do Ash Wednesday. How am I going to do Ash Wednesday? Because there's something so beautiful, right, about being able to reach out and touch people's foreheads and place the ashes. And that feels painful. I think we have been online and continue online, and people are all for that. We're all behind it. We're all of one mind pretty much about that. But I think we did a distribution of take-home things for Advent. And so there was a little bit of drop-off of things or pick-up of things, and people doing that in a socially distanced way. And I think that kind of brought up that sense of, I really miss your physical presence. I really miss you. And for me, I think it brought up, I desperately miss holding them in my arms, like literally putting my arms around people. That's part of how I know how they're doing. I stand in the sanctuary and I look out at them and I see their faces and I feel their hearts. And afterwards, I give them a hug. And that is a big piece of how I pastor. So I think I've mostly just been thinking about how to make it work online, and we have been in ways that have been surprising and lovely. But I think I'm getting to my own grief right now, and I think some of them are as well. In terms of giving up or taking something on, I just read something this morning from Cameron Trimble, who works with the Convergence Consulting. And she wrote something about New Year's resolutions and how she usually sits down and does a vision board and thinks about the year ahead. And she sat down to do it and physically could not. And that may be this year for many of us, the resolution or what we're going to do, take on, let go, whatever for Lent, is really about just staying open, just being here and being present with whatever it is in the moment. And I think that is a lot of what has been getting us through, and maybe will continue to get us through in this time when we can't yet see what the end of it will be. Gosh, I would choose Carol.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carol Robb from Redlands United Church of Christ, where I'm co-chair of the worship committee, and I decided to sign up for this because I think it's time I started figuring out what I'm supposed to be doing. And I also edit a weekly online newsletter for the church, The View. And hi, Stan. It's nice. Stan was one of our interims before we got Jill, so good to see you.
Yeah, Carol, good to see you too.
And I'm going to call on you.
Oh, great. Thank you. That was good and appropriate. You know, I'm doing an interim at Los Altos United Church of Christ in Long Beach. I've been there for 11 months now. And so we did Lent last year, and I actually got in, I think, 2 or 3 Sundays before we went on to Zoom. And we ended up doing everything that way. In fact, maybe we even did Ash Wednesday on Zoom. I can't remember. It would have been hard to do Ash Wednesday on Zoom. But at any rate, this is probably my 45th year of doing Lent. So I have file boxes that are huge. And to me, it gets a little, what I try to do is to not let it be just, oh, well, another Lenten season, you know. That old vine comes around the house again and grabs you, and you just feel like, you know, I've done this so many times. So I'm really open to all kinds of possibilities this year of what could happen in the midst of doing Lent online, like we've been doing. You know, I have lots of ideas, but I also have, I'm trying to just listen and be open to what might be some new possibilities. So I'm really glad to be with all of you, even though I'm a disciple pastor, lifelong 3rd generation, probably 4th generation disciple. And, but I very much appreciate working with those beautiful people at Los Altos.
Well, friends, thank you very much. I think we've all had an opportunity to at least introduce ourselves. And, you know, when planning these kind of workshops, we allocate the times to the different sections, and we've gone way longer than planned, but it was so amazing to hear how everyone is dealing with it. And I hope that you did like I did in my own heart. I lifted up the different, you know, what people said. I made notes on the side here, the struggles, the depressions, the kind of like full circle that we've come, and all of those wonderful things. And one of the someone made a comment that we're still not nowhere through this. So there's still much to come, a lot to come in terms of the pandemic and all of that. And that does give a whole different perspective on Lent. So Stan, it's not only that one digs through the old boxes of 45 years, but we definitely in a different place. So I really appreciate your participation, everybody's participation, lifting you up in your churches. Thank you for how you have shared. The next on our little program here is that we would like to look at some exegetical tools for preaching. And for that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Kirsten, because she's like the specialist on this.
No, I'm just the one that Lee asked, and I said I would do it. So there's a lot to dig into, and as BJ already gave us the heads up, thank you for that, BJ. It allows me to get through more material in my 5 minutes. There are themes, a lot of themes of covenant in this package of lectionary texts, and some pieces about choosing God's ways over the world ways, and a number of pieces about living through trials and suffering, which I felt could be really impactful in this period of time. And paired with those are some texts focusing on justice and service. And that I think might be a really interesting connection to make. A number of my folks have been talking about, as the time is difficult for us personally, maybe we are connected more greatly to God if we can look out as well as looking in. So the Ash Wednesday texts really have some justice themes in them. Of course, there's the Isaiah about the fast that I choose. That is lovely. As BJ said, we've got the first Sunday, the flood story and some connection with covenant. The second Sunday is the covenant with Abraham of faith rather than law. And that connects later with who Jesus is, as the lectionaries put it together. The third Sunday gives us the wisdom of God's teaching, maybe alongside the world's teaching, maybe above the world's teaching, depending on where you want to go with your interpretation. The fourth Sunday connects us with people being saved by grace. And there's a story about Moses and the curing the serpent bites that then comes back in the New Testament as well. A number of pieces in the lectionary this year have an Old Testament story that then gets echoed later in the New Testament texts, which is always kind of an interesting experience. Fifth Sunday is about, as BJ said, a new law written on the heart of forgiveness. So that's kind of where the lectionary, the regular lectionary goes. The narrative lectionary, I've not used very much, but as I looked it up, it looks like that kind of tells the story of Lent through some of the healings, to some of the parables, ultimately the Great Commandment, and the piece about the end of the age, walking through Mark really from chapters 9 through 13. So it's just kind of focused on that piece of Mark. Illustrated Ministry, I don't know how many of you have used their materials. They've been doing some stuff that is specifically intended for online ministry in this time, not only for kids, but intergenerationally as well. Their materials, which have yet to come out, but they gave a teaser today, are really focused on exploring gospel passages about treasures and matters of the heart, things that we hold on to that have meaning for us, or noticing the things that maybe don't have as much meaning for God. They will put out 2 different devotionals, one which is really focused on families, and the other that's intended for all ages. And I have found those useful in the past. They also have materials from previous Lents if you want to take a look at them. And they'll be leading a webinar next week if anybody wants to attend, about sharing practical resources for getting through Lent and Easter during COVID again, because we've been there, but it's all new again this year. Those scriptural texts that they have chosen for each week kind of go from the piece about storing up treasures in heaven rather than on earth to things that Mary has treasured in her heart. The story about the rich man asking how to get eternal life and being told to give away everything he owns. A real focus on the treasures being those things that are spiritual rather than those things that are physical and tangible, which of course I think we're finding in this time. I don't know how many of your folks are a little like mine in terms of having a new and different appreciation for church than they used to, because they really, really need it right now, and they really, really need each other. So it's kind of an interesting time to dig into that sort of thing. So that's what I have to share, and I know we'll have time in a few minutes to dig into some more reflection and sharing on that, but I don't want to take away time from Lee, who's coming next to talk about liturgy.
Thank you, Kirsten. I'm filling in for Jude Johnson today. He is overwhelmed with hospital duties and reached out to me yesterday to see if I could fill in. He did provide some wonderful resources that are in the Google Drive. Jude has been working with Worshiping Ways, and is one of the folks who's actually compiling and writing resources for Lent this year. So he sent us his spreadsheet, and it's uploaded for you. And every day there's a little link in there, and it's a liturgy for that Sunday of Lent. So if you want to just take what Worshiping Ways has done, you can be finished for the day. Some great stuff there with a social justice lean, including one Sunday that's looking at women's voices in justice and in the story, which is wonderful. So I'll direct you to those. A couple other things you will find in the folder. One is a layout of Lent using parables instead of any of the traditional readings. We put it together in Covina a few years ago. We needed something that was more upbeat and wasn't going to be getting into self-deprivation and everything. We've got so many spiritually abused folks in our church. We have to be careful. So it's a layout of texts and themes that just does a parable every week, all the way up to the great banquet at Easter. And then there's also a set of readings for a candle extinguishing liturgy that runs through Lent. So you start with 6 candles out on the altar, and each week put one out, almost a reverse Advent candle concept. So that document is there for you as well. The other piece that I have done, if any of you have done trauma-informed care work, I've discovered that works extremely well at Lent, looking at issues of suffering, of experiencing hurt, cycles of victimhood and self-harmful images, and then looking at oppressors when we become hurtful to others, how hurt people, and looking at Lent as a healing journey. That's another concept of Lent that has worked really well for us. I haven't posted that yet because a lot of it's, if you don't have a background in trauma care, some of it shoots over your head or you're not sure where it's going or uses language that's not familiar. But if any of you are interested in that, let me know if you've got some experience in that area, and I'll send you that outline as well. The idea of thinking about where else in our liturgy we use Lenten themes, how else do we create rituals around this, whether it's having a symbol added to the altar every week, something that's taken away, if it's how we decorate, all these things can make a difference in the celebration of the season. One of the things that came up in the Advent planning from Aaron Beardimple that I thought was worth repeating was, since most of us are going to be online, is thinking about the angle that pieces are presented. That when we have something behind us, if we are the speaker, it's flat, two-dimensional, and so it drifts into the background and looks smaller. That if we can put things at angles, if the altar can be tilted up so that people can see what's on it if it's in the background. If you're setting up a worship space behind you or a virtual background, making sure those things can be seen. And she suggested hanging things down behind us, creating a backdrop and giving some depth and making those themed for the season that we're going through. And I thought that was helpful, again, as we go into this season and try to visually incorporate images of Lent into our digital broadcast. Those are some starter points for you all. One of the things that you will also find in the Google Drive is a planning sheet. Let me see if I can bring that up just real quick. So as you go in there, you'll know what you're looking for. Should have brought it up in advance, but I was too busy thinking about what I was going to say. Here it is. Okay, so this is just a simple sheet that has the date for Ash Wednesday and then each week of Lent. I pulled this from Jude's Worshiping Ways, so they had Women's Week as March 4th. You don't have to do that. And then Palm Sunday and Passion, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter. So the dates are all there. And then a spot to list what scripture you're going to use, a theme you'll focus on, anything special for liturgy, special for music, anything you might be doing for video that week. And then any online tools. Is there something from Illustrated Ministry or a handout that you're going to send home or something you're mailing to people, something on your website, a devotion people could do. And then any notes just to remind yourself, maybe where you want to go with a sermon or things you want to keep in mind that week, a pastoral care connection. We just offer this as a planning sheet for you to help you use today or as you're getting ready. But sometimes in a workshop like this, there's ideas flying everywhere, and having a place you can write those in is a helpful tool. We're going to let you all break out into some meeting rooms for a little bit here. I'm going to suggest that if you are doing lectionary, that you choose the first room, that if you are doing something besides the main lectionary, the common lectionary, you take the second room. And we just want to let you all share your ideas, your questions, your creativity. I'll go to one and Rudy will go to the other, just to play traffic cop and make sure we're all sharing time and nicely and keeping conversation moving. If there is any questions you have for each other, this is a good time to bounce that off. We'll take 30 minutes to do that, which will bring us back together at 12:15.
Okay, so we're a complete group right now.
Yes.
Okay, so we want to continue with our program, and the next up is Robin Marie to share with us some spiritual disciplines.
So as clergy, it's interesting to try to share with you spiritual disciplines, because I would suggest that you could probably teach me more than I will ever be able to share with you. That being said, I do think it is important, even for our clergy, to center in on your own personal spiritual journeys as well during this time. I really think it's important, and I know it's hard. I know it's very difficult. I want to encourage all of you, if you don't have a spiritual director, find one. Find one. Find a prayer partner. Find a safe, sacred someone as your listener. It's helpful, especially in a time like now, truly. And so I want to say that to our members, we want to encourage them that if they don't have any kind of a personal spiritual discipline, to create one, but not to overthink it, because I think sometimes, like New Year's resolutions, we try to take on so much and we fail miserably. So we just stop doing it altogether. So I often say to people, just start off by something so simple, like perhaps a breath prayer, because it only takes a moment. And last year for 2020, my breath prayer was joy and sorrow. So if you'll all do this with me, as we breathe in, breathing in, joy and sorrow, and breathing out, live together. And we continue to do this, breathing in, joy and sorrow, breathing out, live together. And if we can help our members to even do that one little thing during the day, it helps slow our breathing down, often helps our anxiety. It helps to center our course again, back on a simpler path, to give ourselves a break. I often say to people, start your morning with the cup. How many of you start your morning with a cup of something? A cup of tea, a cup of coffee? Most of us do. So I often want to invite people to take your cup and consider the cup. Consider the circle, hold it empty in your hands if you can for a moment, reminding ourselves of God and the love that God has for it as we're filling up our cup. Simple gestures like this can make a big difference. Holding the cup and remembering the warmth of love, that's tangible. Allowing all your senses to be opened up in that moment in the morning. And then offering yourself a breath prayer. There are so many. Joyce Rupp has several books. She's a fantastic writer. I went to her School of Compassion, and it's just been an incredible part of my ministry. But of one of her books, she writes The Cup of Life, and it's a fantastic book, even if you only share one or two of the exercises in the book with your congregation. It's all written out. It offers prayer, reflection, scripture, a journaling prompt. and then a prayer, so people can have an experience and you don't have to write it yourself. I think those are very powerful. I think in the breakout room, I was sharing with everyone, offering your congregants a small box, if you will, or a small, the symbols and the elements of Lent. That often for me, people were talking about the ashes, perhaps a small little baggie of ashes, and you teach them how to do that on their own. Maybe a little bit of eucalyptus oil, creating a small altar. I talked about a piece of twine with some knots in it. A cross, a small bowl of water, a candle, some sand, I think is extremely powerful on an altar right now. Because the sand reminds us of the journey and the wilderness and the desert experiences, not only in the gospel, but obviously in the Old Testament. I put all of these things in my handout for you all, including several breath prayers. Some of the valuable practices that I think can be important during this time can be journaling. And journaling doesn't always have to be written down. I know people who say, Romri, I'm not a writer. I don't like to write. Okay, tape it. You all have phones. Most of you have phones. Tape your words. Tape what you're feeling. Tape what you're thinking in this moment. And then maybe tomorrow, use that as your morning prayer. Offer them different ways if we can to get out of the box. I often say to myself, I didn't know I could do online holy listening until I got out of the way and I allowed God to be present. Sometimes we have to get out of the way. Offering them ideas on meditation. Lent can be a time of fasting. At our church, we've often done Wednesday programs where we invite people, if they can, safely to fast for the day. And when they come in the evening, we have an 1.5-hour program, and people eat soup, a very simple broth soup and piece of bread in silence. People can do that at home too. You can have a weekly evening 1-hour gathering, 30 minutes, and work through a devotion. Special prayers, contemplative prayers, just offering little tidbits of different ways of prayer, and offering some devotions. And you don't have to write them. I love the idea of inviting your congregation to send in a devotion, to send in a prayer or a psalm that speaks to them. And you normally can create 40 pretty quickly, and they're engaged in that process. I think that's powerful. I also put in my resources some websites that offer some pretty good resources. Our national UCC has not loaded up their Lent resources, but they say they're coming very soon. But they do talk about John Lewis and the good trouble that John Lewis was often in, and refer that to Jesus's journey as well. So I look for more of that on their way to Jerusalem. But I've also put some other websites on there, including Bent-A-Vision. If any of you are familiar with Joan Chittister, Sister Joan Chittister, she's fantastic. Again, someone who's written many books. And what I love about her Lenten books is, again, she offers 40 small pages that have reflection, journal prompt, prayer, scripture, and it just offers a time for people to engage individually. And if you'd like, you could do together apart on Zoom and engage in a hybrid form some as well. Joyce Rupp also has a fantastic website. So I've included all of those in my resources. And then finally, I do very much encourage people to read the book by Marcus Borg, The Last Week, over the time during Lent, because you can take that book and read a chapter of it every week. And by the end of it, you come through it. And the book is based on the Gospel of Mark, and it was one of the last ones he wrote before he sadly passed away, but I think it's one of his very best. And it is so incredibly, so it shows such depth in the walk that Jesus is going through. It's quite terrific. And Richard Rohr has a wonderful book as well. If you know of Richard Rohr and Ghost Ranch and the Center for Contemplation out in New Mexico, He has many, many books, but one of my favorites that he does is called Everything Belongs. And there's a lot of really good resources in there to share with your congregants at this time. And then finally, it really spoke to me when Petra was talking about grief and all of these things going on. And there's an author, she's an incredible therapist I met years ago in San Francisco, and she works with Wayne Mueller, and her name is Mariana Cacciatore, and she writes a fantastic book called Being There. And I think it's really a good one for us as clergy to look into and read, because it helps us to just, there are some lessons in there for helping to support people in times of grief, including ourselves. Because remember, we're not just helping people with grief, we're grieving ourselves. As children of God, we've been put in impossible situations over the last year, truly. And I applaud and admire all of you who are staying in there. And I pray again that you find your own holy listeners to help you in your grief. But one of the things that Mary says in this that I like so much is she says it's so important for all of us to understand the salt in our tears. And she says this is a very spiritual thing, and I believe it. She says we must see them, we must allow them, we must listen to them, and we must trust them. Salt. The salt of our tears. And it may be a tearful Lent. So, as I said, trying not to overdo it or overthink it. Any small spiritual practice is a good one, even for ourselves. Because we do so much planning and we do so much participating for others. Don't forget to bring that into yourself as well. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin Marie, and thank you for lifting up some of those resources, even the ones in the document, but also that you held up on screen. For the sake of time, you know, I don't want to go and allow questions and further conversation, because we only have a half hour left, and we still have quite a few things to cover, and we have other people that have also prepared little parts of this workshop, and that would be John Forrest and Mitchell. I don't exactly know who's going to do what and who's going to be first, but I guess it's going to be John Forrest speaking more about the events of Holy Week, and then once John Forrest is done, then Mitchell will continue with your portion, right?
Do you want to switch it since Ash Wednesday comes first?
It doesn't matter.
Oh no, it doesn't matter.
I gotta apologize. I have another commitment at 12:30, but thank you for this, Rudy and everybody. This has been great.
Thank you, BJ.
Thanks for being with us.
Really Lee's brainchild, and Lee
Well,
really
good to
did
see
a
you.
good job here. Thank you. John Forrest, go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the events of Holy Week. And I don't know about you, but leading the services the week during Holy Week are some of my favorite times in ministry, because we get to enter into this sort of grand drama that we tell year after year. And I thought that before, there are going to be lots of ways that we will kind of brainstorm how we might tell this story. But I thought before we do that, it might be more helpful to think about, before we get to the what, I think we might rather focus on the why of the service. So if we have a sort of strong understanding of what the theme and the kind of our desires for what we're hoping to get out of each service, that might help us in our thinking about the what. What do we want to do to get to that goal? And so I was thinking about Palm Sunday, and perhaps Palm Sunday is a protest parade in the face of an unjust system. And then I was trying to put these into maybe a one sentence kind of statement. Then Maundy Thursday, we get the commandment to love one another. We also learn about washing one another's feet, and we learn about communion, and we transition to Friday, and often with a Tenebrae service. Good Friday, we consider the ways that crucifixion and death are a part of Jesus's experience, but our experience as well. And then this year, actually, I think it might even be important for us to recognize Holy Saturday, because I think that there's a kind of sitting and complicated grief that is the theme of that Saturday, kind of after the crucifixion and before the resurrection. We've kind of been in a Holy Saturday kind of world. So some ideas about things that we might do. Palm Sunday. I know that the church in Tehachapi this past year did a Palm Sunday car parade, where they passed out, people drove by and they passed out palms, and then they kind of circled around and waved their palms. There's an interesting article about it in the UCC News. So if you Google Tehachapi UCC car parade Palm Sunday, you'll definitely find it. Other things that you could do, since many of us will be worshiping online, is you could have people find branches in their yard. It doesn't necessarily have to be a palm. You could have them take a video of themselves waving it or a photo of them, and then show those during the service. You could also have people color a palm if you sent them a picture. I know that there's a free resource that Illustrated Ministry has. I think Kirsten maybe brought that up earlier. They have a free image of a palm that you could send to your congregation to have folks color. Maundy Thursday, Maundy Thursday is really it's a really kind of embodied service usually. So it's a hard one to do in a virtual way. But some ideas that, as I was going through this, maybe a virtual potluck where you eat dinner together. You invite one another to your dinner table and Zoom from your dinner table. And then you could create a liturgy around that. One of the things we did this past year, we always have a Tenebrae service during that Maundy Thursday. And so I invited people to read, and I recorded a Zoom meeting just like this of all of the readers and invited them to have a candle with them. And after each reading, when they extinguished their candle, they just closed their box. And it gave this really kind of beautiful image of the disciples kind of leaving Jesus alone in the garden. Good Friday, you could do perhaps Stations of the Cross, images of ways that we experience the different parts of the crucifixion story, and especially do some reflection on that and think about how we have experienced those in the past year. Where have we seen people dropping their cross, and where have we seen people helping them? Where have we seen people showing compassion and washing the face of Christ among us? And then Holy Saturday, I would say something simple, even if it's just a simple half-hour check-in. I don't know that you necessarily need a liturgy even, just some way of marking that grief is a real thing during this season. I'm sure that you all have many ideas, so I think that you'll be able to talk about those a little bit more in a breakout session in a little bit. But that was some of the reflection that I've done.
That's awesome.
Mitchell, you're up. Thank you, John Forrest. Excellent work.
Thank you. I'm going to actually take my virtual background away because I've noticed that when I try and hold up props and things like that, so you get a view of my messy office for the time being. But maybe it's not so much that Ash Wednesday chronologically is the first one that we have in the year, but in some ways it does cycle back, because what you're talking about in Holy Week about the palms. So, you know, it doesn't have to be palms. Only one of the Gospels actually mentions palms. But traditionally, as some of you probably know, when you make the ashes for Ash Wednesday, what you do is you save the palms, or some of the palms, from the previous year. Right. And I even like to point out to the church members, look at these. You remember how green they were last year? Look at what they look like now. This is what Lent is about. It's the dry portions of your life, and you know, and in a moment we're going to be burning these. If you do an actual fire in your Ash Wednesday service, you know, you can actually, I guess the pyromaniac in me loves Ash Wednesday because I get to burn stuff. And some of the stuff you can even burn. Well, let me show you. After years of experience, I found out that this is your best friend, number 10 size can, because it doesn't crack, it doesn't melt. I've had bad experiences with stuff like that before, cracking things. And of course, it's, you know, after you eat your chili or you fed your whatever, you know. And this is clean right now, but it'll oh, I guess I threw away the burnt ones already. Anyway, but that's what you burn your stuff in. And people can, if you don't, maybe you do it on Fat Tuesday the day before, but if you do the burning on your Ash Wednesday service, if you have an Ash Wednesday service, you know, they can write notes. You know, this is my prayer for Ash Wednesday. The next 40 days, I'm going to do this. Or maybe there's burdens on their heart. They can write about the burdens and stuff like that. You know, at one time, we'll all go in there, they burn. But some people, you know, and you tell them, this is stuff you're writing on the note. Nobody else gets to see it. It gets burnt. And those ashes become your prayers. And then you see smoke coming up that's going up to heaven. And that's all symbolic, things like that. But if you're not going to have them write on papers, you can have them tie like a string. You provide the strings and a slip of the palm branch. And they, while in the time of meditation, they can, for each burden they have, they can tie another knot while you're praying. Nice. Oh yeah, and I also wanted to pray for Aunt Susie. She has cancer. You know, they're tying their knots during that prayer time. And then that's part of the service where they all bring it up. All of that goes in the can. You burn it. If you're doing it in front of the congregation, you have to make sure you disable your smoke alarms. And I recommend getting like tile on your table, or unless you have a stone table. Because the can gets really, really hot. So you might need tile. You could probably use trivets, but you know, this stands the heat better if you're actually burning in service. So ash, and then when you're done with the ash, you probably want to have a dedicated bowl that you sift. You want to have a dedicated bowl that maybe you use year after year to sift. Now don't pick this up with your hand. You need to have a, you know, it's really hot. And you don't have to, but you can sift it through into your dedicated bowl that you use year after year. I even write Ash Wednesday so that my wife doesn't find it in the sink later. And she says, I'm not going to eat out of that. But ash is sanitary, you know. It's actually edible. So you get the ash. I like to mix mine with oil, with olive oil. because olive oil, there's no oil in here right now, but I like to mix mine with a little bit of olive oil because olive oil, face it, is an ancient symbol of God's presence. And that way, it also makes it stickier so that you can put a nice dark mark on your church member's forehead. You can use dry ash if you like that, but that also falls off. So I don't use it too much. And the ash that you use, you put it in a small dish like this maybe, and you put your thumb, and traditionally you just press it on. This year I'm a little concerned because I don't want to actually touch people. And I think most people don't want to be touched by me physically. So this is my idea, is that your local, whatever you call the store, discount store, in the craft section may have these small little bags. But if you can't find them, just go to your 99-cent store and get snack bags. They're a little bigger, but you know. So my idea is put a small dab of the ash in there, and then and of course you're going to be masked. You'll probably have a face shield as well, especially if you're inviting people from the neighborhood. So, and I tested it out. So the little dab of ash with oil in there. And you prepare these ahead of time while wearing gloves and sanitary. And then you can, if this is someone's forehead, then it should smear on okay. You see that? So I'm thinking that's my way of not touching them. And of course they need to be masked if I'm going to be applying ashes to them. Although if the numbers get worse than they are now, who knows by Ash Wednesday what the numbers will be. I may not apply any ashes, and I'll just take these bags and I'll prepare 150 of them and hand them out.
Right.
You do take it home, you smear them on each other. It's not a sacrament. That's one thing you can explain to them. The ashes is not a sacrament. If you've been to Roman Catholic services, Ash Wednesday services, they'll tell you it's not a sacrament. So it doesn't have to be a priest applying it. I know it's the one day where I get called father in our church parking lot because people just see the collar. So it's the one day whether you're male or female, you all get to be called father. If you're wearing a black shirt with a collar in it, they're going to call you father. At least many of the Hispanic community who come into your parking lot if you're going to distribute ashes that way. But yeah, it's been a good outreach, I think, to distribute ashes from the parking lot. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'll have little flyers that I'll attach to a sign, a bigger sign that's out on the street. English and Spanish, and they can, you know, tear off one of these so they remind, and they can come on campus. I generally touch 100+ foreheads on Ash Wednesday. Yeah, and even during the course of the regular year, people will wave, and I don't know who they are, but they may have passed through the parking lot. I did put I think I sent Lee like a last year's worship bulletin. So if you want ideas of what to say if you're going to burn ashes, and actually it's kind of you know, burning ashes, if you're going to do an outdoor service, this is the year to do it. Burning ashes indoors is sometimes problematic, but if you're going to have an outdoor service, this is the, you know, burn stuff outside, it's safer.
Wow, Mitchell,
yeah.
I never knew you had so many creative ideas up your sleeve. That is absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't give a lot of theology behind it, but it's, you know, stuff that people like to do and see.
And that is what we need. We thank you so much for everyone who participated in this. Your ideas are just incredible. And on our program, we have a breakout session, but I don't think that's going to happen now, Lee.
Yeah, I think we're tight on time for that. Let's take just like 5 minutes to bounce any ideas off of Holy Week activities, events, anything that was, any ideas that were sparked for you as you heard John Forrest and Mitchell share? Hop on in there, Robin Murray. Just got to unmute.
You have to unmute, Robin Marie.
There you go.
There you go.
So I wanted to just mention that on Holy Saturday, one of the things that I've done at IUCC for forever is I've set up a labyrinth, and it's open from usually 4 hours. And there is a small sheet of paper that people can pick up to give them a little bit of guidance about a labyrinth. But this could be a year that it could be set up in a parking lot. Five circuit labyrinth is quite, it's not very hard to put together with rope, to make one in your own parking lots or to chalk one out. You can do a virtual labyrinth. I know that sounds crazy, but in, I wanted to say September or October, I did a virtual retreat. I do a retreat monthly through my practice as Flowing Spirit. And we did a Walking the Labyrinth virtually. Everyone said, this is nuts. It's not going to work. It worked. For 2.5 hours. And I used a YouTube video, shared the screen, and we walked the labyrinth, and I get goosies. I didn't even think it was possible, but it was a very, very spiritual experience. So for Holy Saturday, it's a very simple thing. They can either virtually, or if you have the ability to chalk one out at your church. I think Walking the Labyrinth is just an incredibly incredible tool for spiritual journey, and considering the pilgrimage everybody has been going through, it might be a good time of letting go, renewing, releasing, centering, just saying.
And there's some virtual ones online too. The Labyrinth Society has some links off of their page that we've used in the camp curriculum that you can use your mouse or cursor to follow along a labyrinth as well. We used it with the clergy retreat back in incredible. September, when we did the Jonah retreat. Yeah, absolutely. And it was still effective. This year, I think we're going to be creative on services. And as you all have service plans that you create, if you have things that are worth sharing, you can send them to me and I'll stick them in the Google Drive. But you all also now have permission to, with that link, to upload things. So if you all have got great tools and you're willing to share them, stick them in there, and we'll add those to the resources that are available. You each just got an email as well, inviting you to reflect on how today was for you as a planning event, what was missing in it, what things you would like to see in the future, what we could have left out that would have been better use of your time, and also the question of what other things besides worship and liturgical planning we can do to equip you. Are there other issues, concerns, or needs that congregations have that we can fill the gaps in? We have a few other ideas started, a few things that we actually had on the calendar before quarantine locked us down. We'll try to hit some of those in the upcoming year again. But we do want your all's input on that, so you're welcome to fill that out. We would also remind you that every Wednesday at 1, the conference hosts a conversation on racism. Once a month, we're going to have a special topic for the next 5 months. And then the other 3 weeks of the month will just be still an open conversation. The first of those will come up on the last Wednesday of January, when Cheryl Farrell is going to lead a conversation with us on vaccination and the distrust of people of color, and some of the historical roots of that and where things are now. So those conversations kick in again starting tomorrow. We hope you will join us if you have time to be a part of those conversations going forward.